They did. So now I should just skip you and get them back. They're on to me. What brings you here?
I'm curious.
You're curious. Curious about what?
Different meditations.
Different meditations. Well, welcome.
I'm here for a meeting, and I think it's going to be very interesting, and I would love to do the meditations and whatever you have to offer. Open-minded
Great.
experience.
Well, welcome. I can almost promise you it won't be the worst hour of your life. And if it is, you don't ever have to come back. That's the good news, right? Anyone else here? Hand in the back I saw for the first time, maybe.
Interested in Buddhism.
Interested in Buddhism. Where's that person? I just heard a voice. There you are. Now I just see a hand. What about it interests you?
Specifically, I think just the practice of Buddhism.
The practice of Buddhism.
Yeah, I don't know much about it, but the little things that I've heard of.
Okay, good. Well, welcome. I'm going to start with a very simple topic just for a few moments, and then we'll start a meditation practice and then go from there. But somebody just asked me a question, and I was looking for it here, and they said, how would I define relative versus absolute truth in Buddhism? So let me start with the basics, right? Relative truth and absolute truth. Relative truth is, for the most part, every single thing you think and see and perceive all day long, every moment of your entire life. That's relative truth. Absolute truth is what things actually are. It's an incredibly deep question, which is why I wanted to touch on it, and an incredibly simple, at least from my relative perception, really simple. Relative truth it's relative to what? To your conditioned life. So how you were raised, where you were raised, what you were taught growing up, who your friends were, who your family is, what city you're in, what state you're in, what country you're in. All of these things create your perception of reality. And this is your relative truth. The world is basically how you perceive it to be. Relative based on your conditioned patterns and behaviors. Now, it's important to understand, I think, when you look at relative truth and absolute truth, to abandon this idea of good and bad or right and wrong, right? This isn't about laws. This isn't even necessarily about morality or ethics, right? I mean, morality and ethics is a huge part of Buddhist practice, but specifically with relative and absolute truth, I'm not even really talking about ethics or morality. I'm just talking about the fact that everything is up to your own perception. Anyone ever disagreed with anyone before? Right? And when you disagree with them, you think you're right. And what do you think they think? They think they're right also. I use that example all the time. Your relative truth is you're right. Their relative truth is they're right. Absolute truth, who knows what the absolute truth is? But my guess is you'll use your relative truth to try to convince them of what absolute truth is, which doesn't make it absolute truth. It just makes you someone who's good at arguing, or someone who really wants to win or prove a point. But once you convince the other that you're right in your mind, that still doesn't make it right. It just means you convince them to take your side of the story. So, relative truth, absolute truth. Another term I like, at least how I was originally taught that, was conventional reality and ultimate reality. And where most of us live is in this conventional reality, where we think that the clothes we wear and the people we talk to and the food we eat and the restaurants we hang out at and our belt matching our shoes. And we think all of these things are relatively important. But ultimately, our life is so short. It comes and goes in the blink of an eye. And yet we ponder so much of our time worried about what our socks and shirts look like. So sometimes it's good to stop and recognize what's really important in life, and how much time we spend focused on things that don't even really make much of a difference. So with that being said, and now that everybody is here, we'll go ahead and start with the meditation practice, since that's what was advertised. Right? Conventional reality said free meditation. Ultimate reality is maybe we won't even meditate. But then you'd all be really mad and angry. And then that would be the best Buddhist lesson you would ever get. You went to the Buddhist temple to meditate and you didn't meditate, you left really pissed off. And that would be the greatest teaching I ever gave. Right? But I don't give teachings, so I couldn't even call it that. All right, so now we'll sit. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. Okay? You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside the room. This is life. Life is filled with chaos and sounds, and the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of that chaos. Right? Most important, especially if you're new, is you won't think nothing. Often people think meditation is about going blank or thinking nothing. You'd end up telling yourself, think nothing, think nothing, think nothing, and that's kind of a waste of time. So posture, you want to be comfortable. If you are on the cushions, it helps. Slide into the front third, push the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. Closing the eyes if comfortable or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with the practice, don't expect anything. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable. Mouth open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach, or or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return to breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Letting go of expectation. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything that I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit, all the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from, what you believe in, and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every single day. The practice of meditation is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because reality is, for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all you're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This is not an easy practice. This is not necessarily a fun practice. It's just sitting and breathing. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's getting to know everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. And learning to be kind to yourself and everybody you encounter every moment of your lives. So if you're brand new to Buddhism, the only thing you need to know is just learn to be nice to yourself and every other person you encounter every moment of your life. That's it. Is that really that much to ask? Just go be nice to people. Well, why would we do that if people aren't nice to us? I'm not going to waste all night talking about that. You can figure that out another time. Right? This practice isn't about what others do. This practice is about what you do. And that's why for many it's very difficult. Because it's not about pointing fingers and blaming others and holding others accountable for your madness. It's about holding yourself accountable for your madness. Not an easy practice, not a fun practice. Holding up a mirror and looking back at yourself is difficult. But that's the practice, as I understand it. You know, I threw something out there earlier today. It crossed my mind, and I said something to the effect of paying attention to what you do with your hands. That's really interesting. I've kind of put myself or been in this, what I'd consider a really intense Buddhist practice for the last 30 days. And so I've become very aware of how you use your hands. And everything with, you know, at least how I look at Buddhist teachings, what my master always said is, you know, body, speech, mind. This is your karma. Karma is action. Karma is not what you get. Karma is what you give. It's what you bring into the world. It's not what goes around comes around. It's not, well, they did bad, so bad's going to happen, or I did good, so I should get good. Karma is simply what you give. And as taught by the Buddha, karma is generated 3 ways: body, speech, mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. That's it. So our thoughts are very important, our words are very important, and our physical actions are very important. And I've been kind of on this really cool, intense practice of just becoming very aware of what you do with your hands. That's very important because so much of what we do throughout our day is with our hands. If we have hands, and I mean that very seriously. You know, I forget exactly how I phrased it, but I said something to the effect of, you know, we have 2 hands, be careful what you do with them. And then I put in parentheses, at most, meaning some people don't have 2 hands. Which is actually really ironic the way things work, because about 20 minutes after I kind of updated the parentheses, you're laughing because you saw it, yeah. I then saw some feed, social media, and it was a soccer star somewhere. I didn't read the article, so I don't know how it was written about or phrased, but it was really cool. It's a kid in the stands who was an amputee, and I don't know the specifics, right? But a kid whose arm went basically to what we would call the elbow. And I just saw the image of this soccer star running over to the stands and saying also only to hear. And the soccer star went like this, and the little kid went like that back. And it was this really beautiful moment, which was like, made me realize something, you know, just so blind to the fact that thinking, you know, we have 2 hands. But brings me back to paying attention to how do we use them? What do we do with them? We use them all day long. And if we're looking at karma, body, speech, mind, what we think, what we say, and what we do, again, so much of what we do is our hands, if we have them. Now, of course, the movement of the hands is driven by our minds, right? If we're aware of that, and if we can do that. So if our mind drives our hands all day long, then to me, it would make a lot of sense to watch how we use them. What do they do? How are they used? Where do they go? How do we create with them? What do we do with our hands? So I found it recently to be a really kind of intense, incredible practice that we can use our hands like anything, skillfully or not so skillfully. Okay. And really until recently where I started to pay attention to it, it became something that I honestly never even thought about. When I thought about action and karma, right? Body, speech, mind, what we think, what we say, what we do, I always thought about more of like, how am I living my life? What am I doing with my time? Where am I going? That's for me what I always thought about as physical karma. And then recently I became really focused intensely on the hands. And I found it to be probably one of the most beautiful practices I've ever done, because it tells you a lot about how you're spending your time. Right? So I always or often throw the things out there like, you know, see what it's like to not look in a mirror the rest of the evening, right? See what it's like to not wear socks that match for a day. See what it's like to try not to get pissed off at somebody tonight. Good luck with that one, right? So pay very close attention tonight. Right? We'll be out of here in a little bit. It'll be 8 o'clock and you'll have the rest of the evening to do whatever you do. Pay very close attention to what your hands do and where they go. Because that'll tell you a lot about where your mind's at. Very directly. Hands don't move without the mind. And until we tame the mind, we will always live in this world of thinking that our relative truth is correct. And as long as we think our relative and conventional truth is correct, then we will continue to suffer and struggle. So good luck with that practice the rest of tonight. It always helps to just keep your hands in the pockets. So I'll use the rest of the time to just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, and go from there.
Can you talk a little more about what you mean by absolute truth?
Were you pondering that the whole 20 minutes of meditation?
No.
Okay. I can try. I mean, the question is, can I talk a little bit more about what I mean by absolute truth? For me, it's always been helpful to approach Buddhist practice. As an example, I think it was Saturday morning, somebody asked, what is awakening? And my response was a 5-minute tangent of everything that was not awakening. Pride, ego, jealousy, greed, resentment, anger, all these things that we get wrapped up in on a day-to-day basis, right? Again, I went on to the socks and the shirts, we spend 20 minutes making sure our shirt matches our shoes, but we want to awaken in like 6 weeks, So I tend to look at things, what is awakening? I focus on what's not awakening, because that's what I have to cut through. What is ultimate wisdom? I focus on things that are not ultimate wisdom, because that's really easy for me to see, right? There's a great metaphor, and I will come back to your question most likely. There's a great metaphor I've always loved about what's called Buddha nature, bodhicitta. And the Buddhist teachings would say that we are all already awakened. And it's just like on a cloudy day, right? There's the sun, yeah? Can you see the sun on a cloudy day? Can you see the sun on a cloudy day? No. Why not? It's not really a trick question. It's pretty simple at this point. There's no trick here. I know I play lots of tricks, but why can't you see the sun on a cloudy day?
Because of the cloud.
Because of the clouds. But is the sun still there?
Yeah.
Yes. So when the clouds part, you see the sun. So the clouds in Buddhist teachings are what we call the 3 poisons: greed, anger, ignorance. So instead of trying to find Buddha nature, ultimate wisdom, right? Find this grand awakening, focus on the things that are keeping us from recognizing Buddha nature, bodhicitta, ultimate wisdom. That's greed, anger, ignorance. So back to your question of what is absolute truth? It would be absolutely impossible for me to tell you what absolute truth is. Impossible. You like pizza?
Yeah.
Great, we can be friends, all right? I love pizza. And so if I tried to tell you what pizza tastes like, does that give you any idea what it's really like? The only way you know what pizza tastes like is you gotta taste it. It's the only way. So that moment you take a bite, that's the taste. That present moment experience. Then when I start describing it, that is no longer the taste. That's just my description of it. Absolute truth in that moment is, what does this taste like in that moment? You can't talk about absolute truth. You can only talk about everything that is not absolute truth, because that's all we know. If we can actually become one with absolute truth in the present moment, to me, that's a lot of what awakening and the Buddha was talking about. So I don't spend my life trying to figure out how can I get to absolute truth. I spend my life thinking about how much am I wrapped up in thinking my relative truth is correct. How much of my life do I spend trying to prove to everybody that I know what's best and I think what's right is right, and this is how everybody should be, and this is what we should wear, and all the things I rattled off earlier. That's where we spend most of our life. When we cut through some of those, I believe we get closer to what absolute truth actually is. but I can't talk about it because I wouldn't be correct. It would just be my perception. And for all of you out there who are thinking, I totally disagree with what he's saying, that is your relative truth. And for the 1 or 2 or 3 of you out there who might be agreeing with what I'm saying, that's also your relative truth. Again, not about right or wrong. It's our perception, right? Also known in Buddhist teachings, this is really getting to the word, the emptiness, that everything is different from how we perceive it to be, right? Hope that clarified things for you.
Thank you.
Yes. I only show up week after week to bring mass confusion to our minds, because I truly believe that the more confused we are, the closer we are to actually awakening. The more you think you know something, the further you probably are from absolute truth anyways. So I hope you all leave more confused than when you showed up. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about right effort?
Right effort. Yes, I can. Just to back up a little bit for those who might not be aware of kind of where this comes from. So right effort, you have in Buddhist teachings, I'll run through this very quickly for anybody who might be new. You have the Four Noble Truths. It's the first thing the Buddha taught, right? There's an image there above the exit sign. There's a kind of piece on the wall. That's where everybody turns and looks if you've never seen it. And it's the Buddha giving the first teaching of, it's called the first turning of the Dharma wheel to his 5 disciples. And he taught the Four Noble Truths. And the first one is life is filled with dukkha, suffering. The second one he says is there's a cause of suffering. And I mentioned this earlier, the 3 poisons, greed, anger, ignorance. We overcome that with generosity, compassion, and wisdom. The next one he said is there's an ending to suffering. That's the third noble truth. That's nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering. And the fourth one he said is the path. That's the Eightfold Path. So these are the steps that we take to work on suffering less. Right? Correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. Views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. Everything I just said, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, is available on Google for free. So Google it, stay within the first couple pages, and you'll probably be okay. And so the question is around what is right effort? Now, the first thing that I would always say is, do you know when you're not putting in the right effort? Yeah.
I'm honest.
If you're honest. Well, if I'm honest with myself, which often we choose not to be, and even when we choose not to be honest, we're still trying to convince ourselves we're being honest. There's some sort of crazy game we tell ourselves. But what she mumbled under her breath was, if I'm being honest, I know when I'm not putting in right effort. Don't do that. And you have right effort. It's really simple. Don't be mean to people, and we have kindness. Right? Don't be angry towards others, and we have compassion. Don't be greedy, and we have generosity. Right? Don't be lazy, right? And we have partially right effort. Now, right effort isn't just kind of the way I laid that out there was about like the opposite of laziness, right? But I look at effort also very similar to diligence, and that you want to understand there is ethics and morality involved in Buddhist teaching, which is very critical, right? I'll give one example. Karmalekchi Sopa was a Tibetan Buddhist nun, and years ago she was doing a talk at USD, and she said she's not a big fan of the whole mindfulness movement because she feels it really strips away a lot of the Buddhist teachings. And she says mindfulness without ethics and morality only gets you so far. Meaning, I could mindfully rob a bank, right? Look how mindful I am as I steal this car, right? So you have to roll in morality and ethics into it. And I think when you look at effort, it's not just about, can I put in a tremendous effort at robbing this liquor store, right? It takes great effort also. But what is the intention behind it? What's the motivation? And is it something that we're doing with the effort to benefit self and others? Self or to benefit others, or a mixture of both? So I think regardless of kind of the laziness factor of it, right effort, and how hard we work at something and the diligence, what's behind it? If the entire purpose of the Eightfold Path is to help you suffer less, then is the effort that you're actually putting in, because we could all put effort into things that actually make our lives miserable. We can spend a lot of time and energy and effort on doing stuff that makes our lives hell. I wouldn't call that right effort. Because it would have to come with some sort of, the Eightfold Path starts with the correct view. And you have wisdom wrapped up and everything else in there. So, what is the effort for? Why are we doing it? It's really easy to say, well, I'm just going to work hard and not be lazy. But why are we working hard? What's it for? What's the intention behind it?
Is it for pride and ego, or is it for
Right.
generosity?
Is it for pride and ego? Is it for generosity for others? What's the intention behind the effort? Again, I'm kind of repeating, but on a very simple level, most of us know when we're being lazy. If, like you said, if we're being honest, we know when we're being lazy and not putting in great effort. But I think right effort really is a lot more than that. The purpose behind it. So, and all of this practice is about, if we're being honest, like you said, if we're being honest with ourselves. If we're being honest with ourselves, can we recognize we get really greedy? If we're being honest with ourselves, can we recognize we get really angry? And if we're being honest with ourselves, can we recognize that we're often ignorant and we think we're right all the time? If we're honest, then we can begin to really bring this practice into your life. And that to me is a part, that's how I've always kind of looked at correct view, which is the first one, is the view has to start with, am I being real and honest with my life, or am I just kind of living this facade and a lie? So those are my thoughts on right effort. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts, questions?
So say we are making an effort to really look at ourselves in that mirror, right? And, see what's there. Good, bad, and ugly. How, or what do you suggest when you're seeing the bad and ugly? How not to get hung up on that?
Give it a hug. Or just tell yourself you're a miserable piece of shit and hate yourself your whole life. That's also possible. You can always take that route. Punch the mirror, break your hand. What a mess. You got two choices. I use those two choices of words. But most people, I think, again, if we're being honest, when you look in the mirror and you look honestly at the way you've treated yourself and others throughout your life, it's not going to be a pretty story. I mean, look where we're all at on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, myself included, right? Unless you got dragged here, we're here because we're beginning to recognize that the things we've done and the people we are and the places, and the places we've kind of brought our madness to haven't always worked out so well. And so, I think it helps to start with a little bit of a pat on the back that says, you know what, I'm here right now. And nobody dragged you here, right? Nobody threw you through that window and put you in that chair. You came here because, whatever the reason is, it had something to do with the fact that you'd like to be a kinder, gentler, happier person towards yourself and others. It's got to be in the equation somewhere. You wouldn't be here, right? Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Congratulations. The other thing is to recognize that when you look in that mirror and you don't like what you see, that's also just a story. It's not who you are. Things you have done do not make you who you are. They're just things that you've done. Okay? If we sat here for 3 hours, then that would be, 12 years too not enough time. That didn't make sense, but it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is, I could sit here for 10 years and give you a laundry list of things that I have done, and I promise you, you would be shocked. And at the end of it, there'd probably be 3 of you still sitting here thinking, I'm never going to listen to that guy. He's done those things. And the only reason I'm able to sit here is because, one, I've been at this practice for 17 years. I've been able to look honestly at all the things I've done and say, those are things I did. And I'm not doing them now. Those things don't make me who I am. Those are things I did at points in my life that were not wise and not kind. But I had to face that. Those things that I've done don't make me a terrible person. They just make me a person who did terrible things. Very different. The hardest part, and I've been there, right? It's a cycle that you get stuck in. You don't like who you are, what you've done, so you get depressed. And when you're depressed and angry, what do? More stuff that you shouldn't do. And then you're like, damn, I did it again. And then I'm more depressed and I'm more angry. So you get stuck in that vicious cycle of self-hatred and self-anger, and I'm not good enough, and I'm not this enough. And, it's bad enough that we tell ourselves that our whole lives. And then we got all these other people telling us that, right? First practice is forget them, man. Just deal with you. What was that old Saturday Night Live skit? Right? Someone work with me here. Who's it? Old?
Stuart Smalley.
Yeah, gosh darn it. What's he say? I'm good enough and smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Something like that, right? And it was the silliest thing, but it's so true. Like, give yourself a break. Dangerous question, I know, but have you murdered anyone? No.
Thought about it.
Thought about it, right?
Asked my sister if I did. She
Again, I appreciate the honesty here, but I don't want to be a mandated reporter here, so let's just keep that stuff quiet. So, right? But that's what you've done. It's not the end of the world. And what other people think of you and how you are, that's their mess, not yours. And once in a while, when you look in the mirror, don't be afraid to spend more time thinking about the good stuff that you've done. Because my guess is you've probably done a few of those things in your life, right? You chose not to murder someone. That's a good thing. Congratulations. All right? So, does that help?
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy. And I know many people in this room can connect and relate to what I'm talking about. It's what drives so many of us to this path and this practice. And what I'm saying is that if you stay with it and you continue to work and you put in the effort and you're not lazy with this path and this practice, which is not easy, right? Easy would be just pretending that everything's, everything's great. No. The hard part is asking ourselves, what are these things that I'm doing that are hurting people? And how do I stop? And that takes time. It really does. But give yourself a break. So, anything else before we close?
I have a
Yeah,
question that you might not really even be able to answer, might take too long.
sure.
But how does Buddhist practices relate to a 12-step recovery program?
Hang on one second, sorry.
Specifically the first 3 steps.
My guess is you came for Buddhism and Recovery meeting tonight? Yes. I have bad news for you. Or good news, depends on how you look at it, right? If you loved everything I said tonight, then good news. If you're like, I hated that, then bad news. You're in the wrong room. Yes. So all Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, our recovery groups are downstairs. Damn it. We got stuck with Jeff. So tomorrow night, or whatever night you go to the recovery group, or Sunday morning, it's up here at 10 a.m. So Sunday morning, 10 a.m., this hall's filled. There's probably 80 to 100 people. And then Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday nights, meet downstairs.
Got it.
Tuesday night, 12 steps of recovery. Wednesday night, 12 steps in. Thursday night's a recovery Buddhist book.
Okay.
Right? And you can tell them, like, I got stuck with Jeff on Tuesday night. They will understand. Our recovery program here is phenomenal. It's strong. I'm not in recovery. I can't touch on the steps at all. Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with them,
Oh,
but
no, now that I know we were in the wrong place.
now it makes sense. But I still think everything you just heard is a great start, right? I always say that, we all could be in recovery for something. I've worked in that environment for 20 plus years in the recovery world, bringing meditation, Buddhist practice in the recovery environment. So I know it intimately for somebody who can only be so close, considering I've never been in recovery, but I'm from the outside. And they play very well together. So I always tell people who are, and many of the people in this room are in recovery, but I always tell people that if you're in recovery, you're working 12 steps, there's a strong correlation between the two, and that the core of Buddhist teachings are focused on cutting through craving, desire, pride, ego, all these types of things that really lead us in many ways to paths we've chosen that turn into addiction. And the Buddha taught that there is healthy craving and healthy desire, that not all craving and desire is bad or wrong. The desire to suffer less is a healthy craving. If everyone here didn't have a craving and desire to suffer less, then none of us would be here right now. So the most important part about understanding desire and cravings as you hear these words throughout Buddhism is to try not to make the mistake thinking that all of a sudden craving and desire is just going to be completely removed from your life. Look at the cravings and desires you have, and are they beneficial or are they harmful? Because there's a lot of cravings in your life or desires in your life that will bring joy to your life. We don't want to abandon those. So, welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple. All right, so I'm going to close on that. Anyone else in the wrong room? Join palms. The benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained be transferred at this moment to those who need it most.